Hello and welcome to the Xtra Edge, a sports analytics podcast powered by Xtra Sports. I'm Dave Grendzynski, and today, folks, we've got a good one for you. We're talking with Jake Garrity. Jake has been the assistant sports performance coach at Arizona State University, the home of the Sun Devils, for almost 5 years. Now, he works directly with the men's and women's swimming and diving programs, the water polo program, and the volleyball program, which is what we're interested in talking about today. And Jake is also responsible for co-coordinating all sports science initiatives for the sports performance department. So he wears a lot of hats, folks. And Jake, let me first start by thanking you for taking some time out of your busy schedule to join us here on the Xtra Edge.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Dave. Happy to be here.
Well, I'm glad you're here because, Coach, we got to talk about your women's volleyball team. Your team is coming off a season where they just finished 28-7 overall. You started the season 14-0. Were 9-1 at home and earned a berth in the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2015. But we're not done yet, folks, because not only do you make the tournament, you go out there and you shut out Georgia in the first round. You shut out the 4 seed Brigham Young in the second round. And then you gave the number 1 seed Stanford all they could handle in the regional semifinal. This is the first time in program history the Sun Devil women's volleyball team won 2 matches in the tournament. And with numerous records broken, the 2 wins in the tournament, 3 All-Americans, milestones that no one can even count at this point, some are calling this 2023 season the best in program history. Now, did the data play a role? We'll find out. But, Coach, let me first congratulate you on all your accomplishments this season.
Yeah, thanks so much. Obviously team effort. I'm so happy for the girls and the coaching staff and Coach Van Neal coming in and changing some things and allowing us to work cohesively. So it's been a great experience.
Well, this is, I've been chomping at the bit to talk to you because this is such a great story. And as you know, we talk about data, insights, and actions on this podcast. The data, you collect it, the insights that you get from it, and then the actions that you take from the knowledge that you gain. And so I always start with this question, though, Jake. I'm very curious, because I know you were at the arch rival. You were at Stanford. You spent some time over there with our buddy Tyler Friedrich. I know you did. But how did you get interested in sports data and analytics?
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to Springfield College for my undergraduate degree. During that time, was exposed, various classwork opportunities, just getting into it and having that practical hands-on experience in the labs, doing some research studies, and really just started kind of getting the gears turning on how can I get more involved in this? Because this is really something that can take it next level of just strength and conditioning and bringing everything else to life. And yeah, I was fortunate to go out to work under Tyler at Stanford, and Chase Phelps, who was the director of sports science at that time. In my role, I worked with a bunch of different sports on the strength and conditioning side, and then worked directly under Chase. So understanding what the role of sports science is, where technology is, data analytics, all of that, it really, was an avenue that I wanted to pursue further. So that really started it going, and here we are now.
And so have you always been involved with the volleyball program wherever you've been?
Yes, in some capacity, I helped Tyler out at Stanford a little bit. It wasn't the main team assignment, but just being able to talk to him and his process, and then also talk to Chase. He did a lot with the soccer team there, so just working with them and seeing it firsthand how they were applying things. They also, I was a test dummy, so someone comes in and throw all the IMU sensors on Jake and see what he can do, and his lack of athleticism at times. So that was kind of the start there.
But experience is the best teacher. And so let's go through that process. They stick all the IMU on you, right? So now you have all these sensors you have to play with. So talk me through that process. Because we have a lot of coaches out there that go through this, right? They decide, okay, we're going to do data. We're going to, I want to collect, I want to learn some things, but where do I even get started? Looking back on that, what do you look back on and say, okay, I did that right. And what maybe would you have changed?
Yeah, I mean, I think naturally, especially in that point in time as an intern at Stanford, I made a lot of mistakes early on. One day we did force play testing with the soccer program, and I didn't collect the data properly. Got a earful for that one, but it helped me learn like, hey, this really really matters, and getting it right, making sure everything's valid, reliable, everything is repeatable. Um, that was really the start for me, and then taking it a step further from there, understanding, okay, how can I see from the back end how Tyler and Chase go about things. I see how efficient Tyler had multiple teams, and what he was doing with volleyball alone was, so extensive. So being able to see how he would take the data from different pieces of technology, and then, like you're saying, aggregate it, take those things, be able to interpret the data, and then what are you actually doing over time with it? Are you applying it? How is it changing things that you're doing or maybe the team's doing? So going through that process, I knew, okay, my next stop, I need to develop, of course, applying it with the teams that I'll be overseeing. But the other aspect was, how do I get on the education side to learn how to, be better with analytics and understand how I can do some software programming that'll help me be more efficient in my process.
So this actually, this next question is almost twofold in a sense, because I like to ask coaches, what are your top 3 metrics? What's your metrics trifecta? But on the flip side of that, I hear our sports scientists tell a lot of coaches, listen, to simplify things as you're starting out, pick 3 that you really like. Let's start here. Is that what you did to try and simplify your process? Pick 3 metrics to work on first?
Yeah, so I think for us, so this all started for us 5 years ago. Kind of when I joined at Arizona State, my colleague Pete Alosi was brought over to the Olympic sports side, and he was able to get a grant from Adidas that allowed us to initially start out with force plates, velocity-based training, different aspects there before we really got into this player tracking side.
So that was like your baseline where you start, right? You get the force plates, and now you're it's like the 101 of data, right? Your freshman year, it's like your first class, it's like your first exposure. You're kind of going through it, right?
Yeah. So I think an important process of that was understanding our first year when we brought everything on. It was, okay, we're just going to learn this year. We're just going to take it in, understand what's going on. There's 70 metrics on the force plate. There's all these other aspects. And then we're going to look and reach out to the right people. What metrics should we be looking at with this? What metrics should we be looking at with that? And then from that process that we got on, there was different aspects. We got involved with the College of Health Solutions here at Arizona State. And we had students help us there on the data science side that allowed us to say, okay, for this sport, these are the metrics that matter. It's not just what, as a strength coach, naturally, we're going to look for output-based metrics. So we need to find what actually matters to us in our daily process as a strength and conditioning coach. And then when we added Connects on, finding those top 3 metrics was completely different, because I remember working with Chris White initially, and naturally in volleyball, right? Jump height is something that coaches want to see. They want to see jump height, how many jumps you're doing, what are the zones you're at. And we took that a step further and looking at accumulated acceleration load and then AAL per minute to really get our intensity as well. So having those 3 were our top when it comes to Connects.
So was it a big change when you added the IMU system and the wearables to the players? And if it was it a big change? I guess let's just start there. Was that a huge change for you?
Absolutely. So the previous regime here, before this staff came in last spring, had conversations with that coach, and we really were just getting down to the basics of practice planning. And we were identifying, match day -1 was too high. So they weren't fresh for a match. Different components, maybe we weren't hitting intensities we needed to be at. So we started out with just basic, okay, let's take session RPE data. So what's the RPE for the practice? What was the total duration of the practice? And then from there, we just built it out. So that got the conversation going, and that was completely free and had no process to it that, really needed to be bigger than what it was. And then from there, the coach asked me, hey, so-and-so team has this player tracking system. what does it take for us to get that? And I said, all right, let's get down to the nitty gritty and go for it and see what we can get. So adding Connexon brought this to life to really say, now we're getting the objective piece, and it's now in coaches' terms, so they can see firsthand, okay, I can understand this happened today because, I understand what drills I put into play. And then when you take it a step further, which we're doing now, which we really spent the first, year or 6 months just collecting data, but now that we're 2 years into it, I can look at a drill index and our coach knows, okay, for our high days, this is what we're going to have. And our low days, we're going to have these drills, and that's going to allow us to apply the correct stimulus on the girls.
Yeah, but you've been using the system for 2 years, but you got a new head coach this year. So JJ Van Niel comes in and Pac-12 Coach of the Year. I mean, this is why I've been chomping at the bit to talk to you, Jake, because this is such a great story. Because, I mean, this is a team that couldn't crack 15 wins for years, and what this team was able to accomplish this year. I mean, nobody could see that coming. So Coach Van Niel comes in, and I've seen some interviews with him, and he calls himself a stat geek. But he also loves training. He says, sometimes I think I love training more than I do the matches. And so was that the perfect match for you then? For a coach coming in like that? Was he a data guy right out of the gate? And was he all in on using player tracking?
Absolutely. I was extremely excited the second he got hired, and I had known just from word of mouth that he was working with a strength coach. He had a sports science individual, and then he also had an intern. So they were all doing that for him when he was at USC. And our first call, he always jokes about it. He hopped on with me and our athletic trainer, Kendall, and he's talking to us, and he's like, so what do you guys have for technology? And you can see he's sweating, thinking we don't have what they have at USC. And we explained to him everything we have, and he's like, oh my goodness, the breath of fresh air. I'm so excited. Like, I really want to use this data. I want you guys to be explicit with me, hold me accountable, and help us get the information we need. So he takes everything, especially in the volleyball world. He started out doing more of the tech side thing. So he was the tech at one point. So he understands how the reports should look, how everything goes. He's an Excel guru, he calls himself. So he understands what I can send to him, and it doesn't have to be super, broken down. But for him, it was a game changer, because he said, I don't know how familiar you were with it. We had 7 girls transfer, and at that point we had 9 girls on the team. Yep. So you're going into a spring training period. You're not playing. Spring in volleyball is going to be a hard period of time, especially on my end. So when that all transpired, we really had to be ingrained in, what is our force plate saying? What is the Connexon data saying? So every single day it was reports getting sent to him. And it wasn't something that was just, falling to the wayside or sitting on the desk that people always say. He was responding every night in email. What are you thinking about this? What if we tried this? And it really, really allowed us to create our process as he was building his culture with the team.
Well, the other thing too is he didn't even really technically see the entire team until like August, right? If I remember correctly. And so, I mean, not only do you have 9 girls, and then you have the rest of the team join in August, and you're trying to piece all this together, but that speaks to the communication part of this. And that's one of the things that we hear a lot about. All the coaches have to be on the same page, and those conversations have to happen. And it sounds like they were for you all, from the second Coach Van Niel showed up on campus.
Yeah, absolutely. Communication is huge for him. He has certain standards with everything that he does. He pushes this to the girls in terms of what we do in the weight room, and he pushes the Connexon stuff. The very first meeting he had, I asked him, hey, we need to make sure we have sports bras. We need to make sure everything is good to go, so everything's proper and done right. And he said, no problem. And his intro meeting, he's going over a bio about himself, and then he's finishing it off with, hey, here's the deal. This is what we need to do for Connexon. This data is very important. We use it at USC. We're going to use it here, and it's going to actually help us make changes. So for him to not only say that to me and then go ahead and say it to the players so they understand how important it is, that was huge.
Yeah. And so when you work through this process kind of, over the summer, did you find that what you were thinking you should be doing and what Coach Van Neal was thinking? Like, did it all align? Were you guys close? Were you guys far apart and came together? How did that process come in? And then, were there specific metrics that you were, he was like, this is a no brainer. We have to make sure we do this. Or were you pushing for metrics on your side too?
Yep. No, definitely. Jumps was huge for him. He showed me the report he had. I'll always remember this. He said, this is a report we had at USC. No context. What was it? Power BI? Was it R? Was it Excel? Where it came from? But I went upstairs to our IT team. I said, hey, I figured out this is Power BI and I need to grab a laptop. And we went with it because I wanted to make sure I was able to develop something for him. And I didn't want to just repeat what he had. I wanted to say, hey, okay, I hear you. Jumps is a big piece to this, especially in volleyball. But there's other aspects we need to look at, right? Because they can do a few jumps one day and maybe the other movements they're doing, a lot of change of directions, a lot of exertions. And then other days they're doing a ton of jumps and maybe, it's a short practice. So the intensity the volume isn't as bad. So with all that being said, yes, we had plenty of open and honest conversations. And what I respect about him is he's always honest. So I could go over to the court. Hey, I saw your report last night and I don't necessarily agree with what you're saying, or can you explain to me what accumulated acceleration load truly is? And when I can break that down to him, he understands better why that applies to the sport of volleyball and why we have to look at other things. Have a triage. So it's not just looking at one thing and that's really not going to paint the whole picture.
Again, it speaks to, how critical communication is among the coaches, all the coaches, and so now you've got the data, you know what you want to look at. So you're using it, right? You're using the wearables, you've got the IMU rolling. What is it telling you? What are some of the insights that you were getting? And you don't have to give away any secrets or name any names, but I'm very because of where, you took this program from rock bottom to the pinnacle in less than 5 months. It's crazy. This story is so crazy. So what was the data telling you?
It was telling us a lot, especially in that spring period. We were training him hard and, for example, we had one setter out there doing the entire workload. So having to manage that was huge. And we had to have a conversation that was like, even this spring now we have 13 girls. So this spring now, what we're doing is harder because we have more depth to the roster, but understandably we can look back. So a big thing that we did was we looked at, number one, especially in the sport of volleyball, understanding that a 3-set match, if you're sweeping someone, it could be easier than, or any of your practices that happen that week. And then on the other end of the spectrum, a 5-set match, and especially what goes on in a match day, could be more stress than they've faced. So we had a great conversation going from the spring training into the fall saying, this is our training plan. I'm going to match your intensity in the weight room. And this is what I need on these days. And this is what you need on those days. And we really took that and ran with it and made sure that we had benchmark values that said, this is what each position needs to be at. And the 3 metrics we're looking at on certain days, this is what we need to be before match day -1. And then, okay, this is what we got out of the matches. So like you talked about, we started out 14-0. Well, a lot of those were sweeps. So we weren't really playing deep into the matches. So understanding all of that, we had to then go back and make sure, what's our conditioning looking like on my end? What are we doing on the court to make sure our start of the week is still exposing them to what they need? So that way, later in the season, we're able to handle it. So with all that being said, kind of rambled on there, but definitely had to make sure that we had benchmark values. And he has a sheet on his desk that he can look at every day and know, these are what the reports are showing me today. And how does that, I can cross-reference that with what it should be at. And then we can have conversations. Hey, Jake, I had to push him a little bit more today. We'll make up for it tomorrow, or vice versa. We didn't go hard enough.
For the record, this is a ramble allowed zone, Jake. So you ramble all you want. because this is such a good story. Now I'm curious about this. So you have the insights now and you're applying them to this team. Looking back, do you look back and go, man, now I see the difference. Now I see what we were missing. Why we couldn't figure some things out. I mean, with you have the data, now you're getting these insights, but does it tell you what was lacking in those years the team wasn't winning?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, without getting into specifics, looked at a few metrics and we understood the duration of practice was too long previously, and as a result, the intensity wasn't high enough. So I remember certain instances, it was, you have those conversations with the coach, hey, girls aren't looking in shape. And then you look at it and it's like, well, what is our training load actually looking like? So yeah, being able to look back and say, number one, I think you were talking about, we brought in a few transfers. So everyone always asks, how did the team turn around? Of course, that's led by Coach Van Niel and what he's doing on the court. But to have us in congruence at all times in our training and understanding that we can push in here now a little bit more in the weight room because of what Coach Van Niel is allowing us to do by making adjustments over there, or vice versa. We were able to take it to the next level to actually see the results and the adaptations that the girls needed to become better players on the court. And also, to the first piece I mentioned, be able to not be burnt out from a 3-hour practice and instead get quality out of a 2-hour session.
And it's crazy to think, because usually you think, oh, we got to practice longer. We're not, we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. We need to work on that a little bit longer. But what the data is telling you, the insights you're getting is, okay, it's about working smarter, not harder, right? Is that generally the sense? So for practice time, for advice for coaches that you would give them when it comes to practice time, is there really that what it comes down to? Practice smarter, not harder, and don't have to give away any secrets. You don't have to name names, but I just think about all those high school coaches out there, or maybe those those smaller schools, those colleges that are out there. Like, is that it? Work smarter, not harder?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as strength and conditioning coaches, we understand physiology, training load, things like that. And I can walk into a gym and I can see what's transpiring, and I can know if it's too much, or if they're on the court for 3 hours, I can understand that's too long. But yeah, I think that is definitely an issue out there that coaches can get an understanding of, because everyone wants to do more thinking that more is better. But to your exact point, well, isn't quality better over quantity? So if we can do more with less, like I view it as the best athletes can get from point A to point B quicker. So if they can get from point A to point B quicker, well, if we can be more efficient on the court and get what we need to get done in less time, then girls are going to be fresher. Then athlete availability continues to go up. Reduce the chance of an injury occurrence. Those are all things we try to get at. And I think the big thing for coaches, I understand it, right? If practice isn't going the way they want, it's very easy to tell the team, start it over. We need to do it again. Or, we need to do this tomorrow to make up for what we didn't get done with quality today. And that's where you really start to dig those holes, because you start to overtrain them a little bit too much. And then kind of what I talked about and alluded to initially was, especially with coaches in almost all sports, or we have 26 sports here at Arizona State, almost all sports, you see the day before a game or a match, and it's like, wow, that's a lot of work if they're expected to play at their highest level tomorrow. So just understanding that, like Coach Van Niel, he's huge on sleep, huge on nutrition, and making sure those things are all working. We do a pre-match lift. Everything is lined up perfectly so that they are set to go by the time they step on the court. But it's not, hey, come in the morning for a quick session, and then we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and then you go to play the match and you're exhausted. So I would say, yes, to the coaches out there, understand that, especially having a piece like Connexon to help objectify things and really inform your decisions. It's an influencer, it's not a driver. So I preach that all the time. I think it's very important that It's going to create influence. It's going to provide this a little bit of storytelling to your coaches, but it's not the ultimate decision at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's, and that's the thing. And so now, it leads us perfectly into some of the actions that you've taken. So you compared to what was going on before. You realize, okay, maybe they were, we were practicing too long in the past. We're doing some other things that weren't working. We need to fix this. Okay. So how do you fix it? So what were some of the things? And again, no secrets unless you want to. But what were some of the things that you changed that really you feel just made a huge impact on this record-setting season at Arizona State?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm fortunate that Coach Van Niel's worked with some high-level strength conditioning and sports science individuals beforehand, so he had some understandings of different training models and different ways to go about how he was going to implement here. And I think the biggest one was the first conversation we had when we were really getting into our 20-hour training period, which is our in-season period. He said to me, he goes, all right, hypothetical situation here. If I was going to give you a bonus for, you making sure that the girls are developing the way here and we're getting the results we want to see in the court, or I was going to fire you because we completely failed and fell on our face, how would you go about planning our training? So the first thing I said to him, I said, Coach, here's a model. A lot of people in strength conditioning talk about Charlie Francis model, the high-low model. Well, that came from track and field. Now, of course, volleyball is not track and field, but how I broke it down to him was I said, Coach, if we can match our intensities together, then the girls know what they're going to be exposed to and what's asked of them every single day. So if you need them to hit it hard on the court, well, we can hit it hard in the weight room too. And then the next day we'll give them something more regenerative so that they can recover from it. And I think that was the biggest one, was just being in line with one another and saying, okay, what's our breakdown look like from how many hours we're spending in each area? And then how are we going about planning the days to make sure we have our high days and our low days, but we try and avoid spending too much time in between. Now, of course, that doesn't go perfectly to plan, but some of the conversations we can have, I think the open and honest communication has been crucial, because we were able to look at some of the things last spring that didn't go well, or some of the weeks that we spiked, and we can now make sure that we're not making those same mistakes going forward. I think another piece to it is with the data side for Coach Van Niel, he is huge on getting an understanding of also what are they looking like on your end. So we can have communication every single morning. I can tell them what the force play looked like. I can tell them how the girls responded to some of the training or demands I asked of them. And he can then make changes on the fly in practice to make sure that they're getting what they need. So I would say the biggest one is what's your training structure? How do we go about that? And then from there is just using the data to, be able to inform what we're doing, whether that's on the court, in the weight room, just to make sure at the end of the day, athlete availability is going up, athlete performance is going up, and we're checking all the boxes there.
Well, I have to think that, and you mentioned it, you start the season 14-0, but a lot of sweeps in there. And then, so were you thinking though at the time, like, I'm a genius? Were you over there like, man, like, look at me, Or were you sitting there going, okay, there are a lot of sweeps in here and we're training this way, and, the intensity is not matching what we're doing in the game. We may have to adjust this come mid-season. Is that where you were? And is that what you did?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great point you bring up. So like I kind of mentioned on a report, it was nerve-wracking because we didn't have many 4 or 5 set match.
Okay, so you weren't a genius.
He's asking for, well, what would that look like? And I would have to explain to him, well, here's what we had, in the previous season. But with all that being said, we were able to say, and he was saying it firsthand, he's like, did we schedule too easy? Is that why we're 14-0? So we went to play the team down south, Arizona, and we swept them. And it was at that point that it was like, okay, we've got something special here. We can definitely hang with some of the best. So when we were going through that process, yes, leading up to that, we were having some conversations that, hey, success is great, but both of us are always forward thinkers, and also, kind of looking around like this might be too good to be true. Stressing about the next thing. So we were having those conversations of, like you're saying, number one, what do we need to make sure we're doing in practice? So our start of the week, the first practice of the week after their off day, we would make sure it was hard enough to be equivalent to a 5-set match. So we're saying, okay, if that point comes, we're ready for it. Now, of course, when you're actually in a match, different stressors, different variables.
There's other factors.
But that stuff happened. The other thing that we factored in was we went down and played Cal, and they ended up going 5 sets. Wasn't the best match. And one of our starters had a insane amount of jumps. And it didn't take much to see the next morning that she was hurting a bit. So being able to have that conversation with them and say, okay, we understand. We tried to prepare for this. Here's what they're actually feeling like afterwards. And then he goes and makes an adjustment on the fly. And that way, then the next weekend, she goes and plays an awesome weekend, where we easily could have ran into an issue that would have said, are we starting to spike her load and it's too much? And then the weekend comes and she's not playing at the level she needs to be at. So those are some of the things there. But yes, definitely 14-0 was nerve-wracking. And then even now, we're still trying to reinvent the wheel on things. And JJ always talks about making sure his coaching buddies say, you don't want the sophomore slump. First year, easy to revamp things, but you don't want the sophomore slump after that.
Yeah, no pressure, coach. But it just goes to show you that, okay, you can get the data, you can get the insights, and then you can take action. But it's not set in stone. It's a constant. You're improvising and adjusting. Because also your players are changing every year. I mean, you're in a unique situation, where every year you're losing somebody to graduation or, whatever, and so, I just think, what you guys were able to do in such a short amount of time is just so commendable, and I'm glad to hear that the data helped along the way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even before Coach Van Niel arrived, we were fortunate that the last 2 years, so 2 in season, so from fall 22 to now, our athlete availability went up 90 to 95%. So that wasn't the case previously. So being able to have that and know that, okay, best teams, they're healthy and they're performing at their highest levels at the end of the season. Like that, I think we all can kind of agree on that. So being able to have that and know that, for sure, Connexon played a part in it, absolutely. But just having that all together is just we're really fortunate that was the case, and looking forward to continuing to build off that. I would say another piece too, and I'm sure you'll get into it here, but just having it for an understanding of returning to participation. So like I said, we had great athlete availability. We had individual. Had a stress fracture, a femoral stress fracture, huge bone. How does that happen? You can obviously play the question game and the why me, or you can act on it. So what was awesome is we were able to create a return to play progression for her, and then talk to Coach Van Niel and say, when she comes back, you have to understand that this is her restrictions on jump count. This is a restriction on AAL and AAL per minute. And to be able to go through that and speed up the process and her recovery, you're not changing the time frame, but you're making sure it's done right. And I think that's so crucial, because a lot of times coaches might say, yeah, sure, let's use the Connexon data. And they restrict the load so much that then they go and play in a match. Finally, the coach is like, all right, you're off the bench, you're in, and they go in and they're not ready for it. So it's been awesome to have it for that too.
Well, and so before I let you go, though, I'm curious to see, are there some holes that need to be fixed? What's still missing, do you think, or what would you like to see down the road? There's just something that you're like, boy, man, I wish we could have that.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we had all the money in the world and could get an LPS. But no, I think the big one that which again, I think it's important to recognize, and there's nothing, we had no conversation previous that I need to say this, but I think with Connexon, what I appreciate, especially from the customer service side, everything gets fixed on the fly. And then also they're constantly asking us, what do we want to see? And then they make those changes. So the first one I can think of is we want a live jump count. Coach Van Neal was like, how am I supposed to know where a girl's at? And then the next piece was, we want to make sure it's an IMU, it's an estimation, but how is it more accurate so that I can tell him that, hey, it's 120 jumps for this person. And then I look back later and she's at 140. So those things were crucial. I think just data analytics in general and accompanying everything all together is so crucial. Having platforms or reports, things that you can get to your coaching staff on the fly, get to your training staff, your dietetic staff, making sure that they're all aware of this is so important, because it's natural, especially as a strength and conditioning coach, to look at things and say, well, they're getting better in the weight room. But we want to make usable strength. We want to make usable qualities that will transfer over to the sport. We want to make sure that the information we're providing is giving the coaches something to work with. So having the technology to do that and the data that comes from it has been a game changer for us. Absolute game changer.
And last question, how much does the data, is it equal? Is it 50-50? Does it matter for the off the court training that you're doing in the weight room as much as what you do during a practice, as far as, the actual volleyball practice? Is it like a 50-50 split, or does it lean more towards, you're doing that off the court stuff in the weight room and some of those things? Would you give that a little more weight?
Yeah, I think I would say in the springtime, and again, it's pushed by coach, but the weight room is definitely a huge focus. And then obviously the conditioning aspects too. So I would say there's more weight to that in the springtime. But also, understandably, he wants to push them in the gym. So we do reference.
I mean, he is Pac-12 Coach of the Year, Jake. I mean.
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it's totally understandable. But what's awesome is we can have conversations, which I think sometimes, and this is something we ran into in the past, and I talked to you jokingly about, fired or bonus.
Yeah.
The proposition he made. But what was so crucial, I think, on my end, I can say he allowed us to have the actual time we needed in here for the girls to develop in the way that they needed to help on the court. Now, then when we went in season, our training changes in the weight room a little bit. And of course, the emphasis shifts to volleyball. So at that point in time, that's when we're really, really utilizing Connexon. And then we're still referencing force plates, but and stuff we're doing in here, but it's definitely has less of a focus.
So it's again, improvise and adjust. There's that fluctuation. Jake, this has been great, man. You've been awesome. If somebody wanted to reach out to you, find you and ask you a question, how could they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the best way to reach me is my email, jgarrit2@asu.edu. Not sure why they cut off the Y to my last name. And you can also reach me on LinkedIn. Not a big social media guy, but definitely can reach me, and I'm happy to speak to anyone and at any point in time, and also happy to learn from others too.
Yeah, no, this has been great, and like I said, your story is just, it's unprecedented what you guys were able to pull off this year, and I wish you much success heading into next year. And now it'll be interesting to see with Coach Van Neal there. Now you guys, everybody together for a year, and everybody using the data together. How you go forward, and there will be no sophomore slump. That much I know. And I think that next year we'll be talking about 4-5 wins in that NCAA tournament, maybe a trophy. How about that, Jake?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, naturally, you get hungrier, and we talk about this is the beginning for Sun Devil volleyball and the things we're doing on the support staff side and working as a performance unit together, from coaching staff to support staff. We're always trying to build and fine tune and make sure that we're improving in that aspect, because everything is changing on the fly, like you're saying. So we have to be adaptable, and definitely very excited for the future.
We are for you as well, Jake. Thanks a lot for joining us today on the Extra Edge.
Thanks so much for having me, Dave. It was a pleasure.
Hey, if you know a great coach like Jake who's doing great things, winning games, and doing it with sports data and analytics, we would love to hear about them. We may ask them to be a future guest on the podcast. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Connects on Sports, or look for us on LinkedIn at Connects on Sports and Media. Remember, we want you to collect that data, get those insights, and innovate your game, folks. We'll see you next time.